Okay, so welcome to the UNF Social Work Programs Agency Field Instructors Training. I am Ross McDonough, the BSW Field Education Director.
Welcome, my name is Akanke Almarayo, the MSW Director, Field Director.
So we are so thrilled to have you here with us today. And we know that you feel the same way about social work education. We know that it's one of the very important professional dedications that you have, and it means a lot to you to help to train the next generation of social workers. So I want to start by saying thank you for doing this. Field education is not something we can do without community support and without partner agencies, and frankly without supervisors. So you are a very important part of educating the next generation of students. And I'm often reminded that your students will hear your voice in their head 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So one of the wonderful things about getting to mentor students is that you're making a profound impact, not just on that student, but also on the clients that they serve. And so thank you for that. All right. So we've already introduced ourselves. Do you want to talk a little bit about where we are in the development of the MSW program?
Yeah, well, we are, as you know, we started a new MSW program. This is the second year. We finished the first benchmark, and we are on to the second one. We do have a review coming up. CSWE, that's the Council on Social Work Education, will be joining us in November for the second benchmark review. And we'll keep you posted.
And the BSW program is going to graduate our 5th class this year. We have about 65 students in the program right now. 38 of those students are in the field currently. So we would like to let you introduce yourself. So if we could just kind of go around the room and tell us your name, your agency, the population that your agency works with, and how long you've been working with social work students. Bill, you want to start us off?
Great, thank you, Ron. Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Kintz. I am Associate Professor of Social Work with Florida State University, and I've been with the college for 8 years. I'm attached to the Department of Children and Families under a national initiative through Health and Human Services with state universities and public welfare agencies, primarily in southern and rural states where there's not very many social workers populated in those areas. And so my role is essentially to be attached as an embedded professor at Department of Children and Families, and I'm also the area coordinator for all the MSW, BSW students for the university in Northeast Florida, particularly along the coastal counties, including Clay and Putnam. I have colleagues in Gainesville and also in Tallahassee. Prior to that, I was an agency executive with Family Foundations. And before that, I was with Catholic Charities for a total of 25 years, both in Indiana, where I grew up, and also in Miami. I graduated from Indiana University. We have a lot of Indiana connections here.
Another one too.
And so it's a great state. It keeps Ohio from slamming into Illinois. But I'm so happy to be here, and I was really glad when the program began to take root. Remember back 10 years ago, Ross, when Jennifer met with us at NASW to look at creating a BSW program. So, I've been an admirer of the university and so many dedicated students. I know I could go on, but I'm so happy to be here.
Great.
Yeah, we can just go down and up and down and up.
Good morning, I'm Carla Flowers, and I am a student social worker with Duval County Public Schools, working primarily with students and families that are enrolled in school within the local city. I've been working with students for the last, pretty much, I'm not quite sure, because back in the day, we had interns, probably about 15, 20 years ago. I had the opportunity to work with some interns at that time, and we're just now bringing them back over again, so we're grateful for the opportunities.
Good morning. My name is Monty King. I'm with Duval County Public Schools as a social worker. The population I work at Grand Park Alternative Education Center. The population I work with is the children who are in middle school and high school and their families. And this is my first year as being a supervisor.
Hi, I'm Harriet Fiambini. I work for Children's Home Society. I'm in the Early Head Start program. We work with low-income refugee families, ages 0 to 3, to get them ready for school. I'm fairly new. I've only started in June, so.
I'm Sharon Sirkin. I work for Duval County Public Schools. We work with students from pre-K through 12th grade. And I've been with the Duval County for 24 years, but this is my first time supervising an intern.
My name is Deetra Smith. I'm also a school social worker for Duval County Public Schools. My population is pre-K to 12th grade. I've been with the district for 14 years, and this is also my first time supervising.
My name is Evelina Walker. I work for Pace and for Girls. I'm a counselor. Our population is from 12 to 18, so middle and high school students. We supervise a lot of students from the Florida State University. So this is probably my 6th time supervising.
Good morning. I'm Donna Cobb. I'm also an employee of Duval County Public Schools. I've held several different roles at Duval County Public Schools. Currently, I'm a social work specialist, and I have to add that I'm very proud of Ross. I knew Ross. Want me to tell him? I actually hired Ross. So I've known Ross when he was with the school system, and I've watched him grow professionally. I've watched this program grow. I am so proud of UNL and Ross.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Hi, I'm Ann McCullis Johnson. I'm the clinical director for a nonprofit 501c3 veteran-run organization. We service post 9/11 veterans and support people. We do retreats at no cost to vets and their support person, so we're not just pigeonholed into spouse and the veteran. I'm retired from the great United States Army. I retired as a full colonel, social work officer. And part of our ethos is to give back. So I have found my second calling. And I'll also put in a plug. I'm also the proud parent of a graduate from the BSW program here at UNF. She's gone on to get her master's from a little place called Tulane University. And she's now working at Wakaiba, and she's a task supervisor. So, and, you know, the cycle is continuing.
Hi, I'm Christy Cummings. I'm new faculty here at UNF, and I'll be teaching one of the field seminars for the first-year master's students.
And a fellow Hoosier, too.
That's true. I did both my bachelor's degree and my master's at Indiana University in South Bend, and then I just finished up a PhD at Michigan State.
My name is Chris Atkins. I'm the program director at Jewish Family Community Services for the Achievers for Life program. Our population is middle school students and their families in Duval County Public Schools. It's a program funded by United Way. I've been working with both BS and MSW students probably for the last 4 years, and looking forward to continuing to work with more students in the future.
My name is Patrick Finschultz. I work at the Salzbacher Center. Now that we've opened the Early Learning Center, we officially work with pretty much all populations at this point, if ever the bottom falls out for anyone. So that has been very good. I think thus far it's been a good experience for the interns. I think I'm probably an outlier that I started supervising interns, I think, 2 months after I graduated, which I think is against policy. That was about 6 years ago, and I've enjoyed that piece of it very, very much. And I'm a behavioral health counselor at the South Park.
Patrick, when one teaches, to learn.
Yeah. Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Nick DeFury, and I work for Gateway Community Services. We're a fairly comprehensive substance abuse program, and I am a therapist in the outpatient department. I want to thank this lady for her service. I have a soft spot in my heart. I have a daughter who's in the Air Force currently.
The chair force.
Turn the cameras off.
I graduated from Florida State University eons ago, 1981, and have been in the field primarily substance abuse with adolescents for 30 plus years. And we moved to Jacksonville a couple of years ago, and I got on with Gateway. And I've been working with interns most of my career. I love working with students. They're enthusiastic and eager to learn. So I'm glad to be here.
Good morning. I'm Jan Morris. I'm an LCSW, and I currently work for United Way of Northeast Florida as a funder for many of your organizations. Being the only social worker actually at United Way, I act as the supervisor for anyone who brings in a BSW student. United Way offers a unique perspective in some different elements of the social work world. We have had interns who were interested in community advocacy, public policy, as well as working in our 211. We run all of our interns through the 211 training. A good social worker doesn't do everything, but knows who does. Because it's about connecting people with resources and for all aspects of their life, and so there's no better place for a student to do that than go through the 211 training and actually act as a 211 operator. In addition, we usually run them through another track. We currently have an intern who is interested in intergenerational senior services. Again, we don't do everything, but we know who does. And so we offer a unique opportunity for students, BSW and MSW students. It offers a very broad perspective.
One more.
Excuse my tardiness. My name is Tamika Jones. The agency I represent is Children of Inmates. I serve under our program director as intern supervisor part-time, so whenever I kind of cover for her. The population that we serve are children and relatives of inmates throughout different prisons throughout Florida. With our interns, they get a unique perspective because oftentimes it is that child and also the caregiver, but then times we see where it may be a nephew or a niece, someone else in the family that was close to that inmate. The referrals come from the inmate themselves, and so they recognize and identify that they want to be able to spend more time and make sure that their loved ones in the community have the services that they need. And so the interns are there to provide care coordination, oftentimes advocacy, working through like IEP supported, and different things, whatever the caregivers may need. My experience as supervising social work students has been about 6 years, between originally from Louisiana and now here in Florida.
Well, I am just like struck by how much experience and what a great diverse group of people who are doing some really wonderful things in this community. It's always so. Every March I look forward to the social work lunch through NASW because you get to feel the energy of that room when you get a bunch of social workers together. It's just such a neat thing. So thank you all for being here. So let me provide a quick overview of what we're going to do today. We're going to just sort of go over the nuts and bolts of what is field education at the generalist and advanced generalist levels, which we're going to find out more about today. Some of you are supervising BSW students, others are supervising MSW students, and we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between what those experiences should look like. We're also going to talk a little bit about what your relationship should be like with our students and what their relationship should be like with you. and what you can expect from us as a social work program, as well as we're going to talk about what students need to learn. As you know, social work programs that are accredited have to answer to the Council on Social Work Education, and they develop competencies for practice readiness that we have to be able to demonstrate and measure. And we do a large part of that through field education. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well, and how we measure that competency or mastery. As well as, you know, everybody's favorite in social work, paperwork. What kind of documentation you need. We've really tried to streamline this year, and it's, I think, actually getting better how it works, which is unique in documentation. So what is field instruction at the generalist level? So generalist social work is, I think, a good synonym that I like to think of as sort of case management. So a generalist social worker is practicing at the BSW level or in the first year of an MSW program if it's a traditional 2-year program. So supervision for a generalist social work student is really to help them apply what they've learned in the classroom to what is happening with their clients and in the agency work that they do. Supervision is provided by you all or someone else in your agency who helps that student by helping them become more effective in their practice and more comfortable in their role as a professional social worker. We call the supervisor for bureaucratic and administrative reasons an agency field instructor. And so you'll sometimes hear us refer to you all as an AFI, and that's what that means, agency field instructor. It just basically means the supervisor within the agency that's providing the supervision. Supervision, you know, best practice is once a week. We know things get busy, that's not always possible. We hope that it happens at least every 2 weeks. Field instruction for generalist social workers. You want to talk about at the master's?
So it's basically the same. We ask that all that we, the Council on Social Work Education, like to go back there because it takes the heat off of us. Our leader says that the MSW students in placements must be supervised by an MSW with 2 years post experience. And we ask that you do have supervision minimum of 1 hour per week. And when we say supervision, we are asking that you not only meet with the students to do staffing, but you also, I like to say that you are modeling for the students, so there's some informal and formal supervision taking place. I also ask that you, not only you educate, so the role, the reason it's an education, the educator's role is because you're teaching as well. So if you have any good articles or you've seen something that you really want the student to learn a little bit more, feel free to share that information with them. When you give them feedback, we ask that you look to see how they are working on your feedback. So we don't want you to give them feedback and then it never gets implemented, right? So those are the things that we're looking for the instructor role to take place during supervision. So by the way, you can say, you know, last week we talked about A, B, C, and D. You want to see how the student followed up by having that conversation during supervision. This is a time where the student is reflecting, right? Lots of self-reflection should be taking place. And you remember those process recordings? Anybody from the old school? We had a column for self-reflection. That kind of gets lost in social work. So we want, during supervision, that conversation should take place. How are you doing when you saw this case or whatever, you know, you're dealing with? Especially now, I had a field instructor call me about the shootings that just happened and how do I process that with employees and so on and so forth. So those are the kinds of conversation, including the staffing, that should take place during supervision. Now, if you have a task and a field instructor, the task instructor is usually the day-to-day supervisor, so the person who the student gets tasked from, the go-to for any, you know the agency better than sometimes even, or you know the work of the population even better than sometimes the field instructor. That's the person that the student will meet with the minimum of 1 hour per week.
So how is generalist social work different from clinical social work? So generalist students are not clinicians. They're really doing more traditional kind of Jane Addams casework, right? So think back to your generalist placement. They should be facilitating some level of planned change with clients at the micro, meso, and macro level. So I tell my students basically what we do in generalist social work is we meet a client where they are and we ask them where they want to go. And then we figure out how to help them get to where it is that they want to go. It's important that they work in a direction with a clear outlined goal for what they want for themselves, and then we connect them with resources, we give them support, we help them access services that they need to get to where it is that they want to be. And I know this is a lot of, it's just total review for you all. Many of our generalist students will go on and get an advanced degree in social work. Some of them are very interested in clinical social work. I would say half of our BSW students go directly into a graduate program, where the other half are interested in working for a while. They need this foundational experience in order to be prepared as clinicians. So sometimes you get a student who says, I'm getting my MSW, but I'm going right to get my, or I'm getting my BSW so I can get advanced standing in the MSW program. I want to be a clinician and I want to be in private practice. That might be their goal for themselves, but at the end of the day, they're a social worker first and a clinician second. And so all students need to get this real traditional social work, connecting clients to resources kind of experience. I still see a few clients a week in a private practice, and you know, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, we're not doing clinical work if someone doesn't know where they're going to sleep tonight, or they're hungry, or they're scared, or they're homeless, right? So we never stop being social workers. So what role does the supervisor play in the relationship to the student? We think of you in part as a mentor, kind of a coach, also an instructor, somebody who's teaching them. In some ways, a supervisor is also a support system, an advocate. Sometimes we have students who want to have a new or different experience within your agency, and they may ask for you to help them make that happen. So sometimes we can advocate on behalf of our students. Also a broker of resources, helping them get connected with what's available in the community. I tell my students this is one of the toughest learning curves in your beginning practice will be, you don't know what the resources are, so they're going to need your help with that. But you're also a role model. As a generalist practitioner, you know, students are going to be doing a variety of different things in their practice. Here are some roles that we hope you'll avoid with our students. Being their friend, being their best friend, being their lover, being their roommate, being their parent or family member, their drinking buddy, gambling partner, co-defendant, etc. Of course, this is very tongue-in-cheek, right? But good boundaries are important with our students. And I know it's very common for social workers to go to happy hour after work on Friday. Some of you might be doing that tonight with your colleagues. We've told our students that we really want to keep this relationship professional with good boundaries. And we told them when you graduate and you're working in the field and they invite you to happy hour, you can do it then. But for right now, let's just keep this professional and not maintain a dual relationship. So what role should the student play in your agency? Of course, the primary goal for them is learning, right? That's why we're doing this. There's also, the agency is tasked with that, but also you're going to get somebody who's going to work with clients on behalf of the agency. So students should become an asset to you. I always remember that when you have a student in the beginning, often it's more work, but over time it should feel like less work, right? As they become more confident and they're able to do more things and they need less guidance and less supervision. Your expectation of them should become more demanding over time. The longer they're there, the more you should be able to expect from them. And they should be given increased responsibility. Students, by the end of their internship in April, the end of April, they should resemble an employee. They should be given responsibility that would be similar to what you would expect of an entry-level social work employee within your agency.
Just want to say for the MSW students, they have to complete 500 hours for the whole year. So you have 250 for the first semester and 250 for the second semester. And they should resemble, yes, your employee, but also keep in mind that they're not employees. And I say to students that they are interns, and anything outside of that is unethical. So that means that even if they're working with their clients, we say that, remember to tell your clients that you are the intern and nothing else, okay? So for the advanced generalist, so this is what the MSW, this is the only concentration we have right now, is the advanced generalist. So for many of you have heard that you've been a field instructor for other schools, and you might notice that they do have maybe another concentration, more clinical, where many of our students want to end up. And we do, they can, even through the advanced generalist practice concentration. And by that, we mean it's basically just building on their generalist skills, but with a focus on really combining the liberal arts learning. So we're combining all the history and anthropology, so you might have narrative. We try to talk about narratives in some of the classes, and never leaving the theory piece out, even though we don't leave it out in the generalists, right? We bring it in, and certainly evidence-based practice, they just get a lot more deeper in understanding those theories. And we do still do a micro, meso, and macro. This is the piece that we stress a lot, the macro piece. Even if the student is placed at a clinical facility, we still ask that they understand the system. So we understand they have to ask those questions. As you know, we all went through this. We had to take macro classes, and I always say you can't have micro without macro. You have to understand the system first, you know, where the people are coming from, the client that you see in your office. You want to understand the policy implications, you know, so on and so forth, and you can go on and on and on about macro, right? And that's basically, so there's always an overlap, right? And this is what we want the students to understand, and for the field instructors as well. You know, it's a micro, it's a meso, and a macro, similar to the generalists, but with more in-depth focus. We do have clinical courses, so the students can sit for their licensure when they graduate from even an advanced generalist, but now they have, to me, it's deeper. But that's just my bias. I didn't have that opportunity, but I still focus more on the macro, the community organization work, and so on. So I'm really happy and excited about this concentration. Thank you. And this is just a little bit more. If anyone is interested in hearing more about the advanced journalists, I'll be happy to send you some information.
Only that I'm glad you're bringing out the macro, because you know, we have such a wealth of trainings and presentations and seminars in this community, you know, particularly in Duval, maybe less so in the outlying areas. But I encourage my students to attend those. You know, that's part of their internship. I want them to be engaged in their community.
Yeah.
That it's not just the one slice of pie that's in-house.
Yes.
It's the whole universe.
Yes, and you need to know where the client that you see, where they're coming from, you know, and who benefits and where's the gap and all those questions that we should be asking. But, yeah, thank you. So that's, yeah.
And I think a well-rounded social worker, you know, can do clinical work, but can also work on behalf of social justice. And, you know, these are interesting times, right? And there's opportunity for change, and we want our students to have that opportunity to feel empowered, to make a difference in the community and to promote social justice. And so that's a big emphasis here at UNF. We want them to be able to do clinical work, but really the emphasis here in the Advanced Journalist program is on being change agents in their community. So when you have a student, we'd like to think that our students are the best in the state. They were selected, you can't get into the social work program without jumping through several hurdles. We make sure that they have appropriate interpersonal skills, that they can write. We do a writing assessment. Even at the BSW, before you can declare social work as a major, we talk to them face to face to make sure that, you know, they can do the basics of interpersonal communication, like eye contact, and, you know, can carry on a conversation. So we know at the very least, our students are, they're capable of becoming social workers. We do a pretty good job, I think, of only allowing students into the program who we really believe have, at least at the most basic level, the tools that are necessary for this kind of work. If they have not performed at a high level while they're in the program, we do not let them go into the field. That happens sometimes. Every once in a while we'll have a student who, especially at the undergraduate level, who has, you know, personal tragedies or mental health issues. We only send students into the field if we believe that they are completely ready for this experience. And the reason for that is we know that our agencies are serving oppressed and marginalized people, right? Underserved people. And that's a profound privilege. So we only allow students who are really capable of doing that work, who are ready for it, to go into the field. MSW students, the same thing. They are assessed to see if they have the basic tools to be able to do this. We had a very small class the first year, and sometimes you get a little bit worried that, oh gosh, are they going to ask us to lower our standards and who we let into the program? And that did not happen. We can turn students away if they're not going to be a good fit for our program. So please know that we're very careful about who we let into this program, because we think we should be very careful about who we let into this profession. Also, our students have demonstrated, and some of them know the code of ethics better than me, just kidding. But they get a heavy dose of the code of ethics, just so you know. Our BSW students have already completed a full year of coursework. So they've had all their theory classes and several practice courses. They've taken groups and individuals and families,
and basically the same for the MSW. They come in, many of them are either first year, I don't know which students you have, or second year. If it's the first year, they started from scratch, the foundations, and they will have all these courses, probably with the generalists, these four. If you have an advanced standing student, which is the student who's doing 1 year, they would have had it similar, the BSW courses, and now they should be enrolled in some of these concurrently with the placement. So basically what we're saying is that these courses are really preparing them for being in the field. And certainly the MSW advanced courses are really preparing the students for the advanced generalists. So if you have any questions at all about the advanced generalists, ask your students.
Our first year MSW students who their undergraduate degree is in something other than social work. That's true almost all the time. There are some rare exceptions to that. And the reason for that is because if you graduate with a BSW, I didn't know about this when I was an undergrad. If you get your BSW from a CSWE accredited program, you can apply for advanced standing. So all of our traditional students, for the most part, their bachelor's degree is in something other than social work, so psychology or sociology or something like that. But a lot of them already have some level of experience in social services.
Is it true, Ross, that, I mean, and I've seen this at FSU, if they had gotten their BSW, say, 10 years ago, you know, there's a statute of limitations. I think.
Right.
Yes.
You have 6 years from graduation date to every program is a little bit different, but the average is 6 years to enroll in an advanced standing program. If you wait more than that, then you'll have to do the 2-year traditional MSW. So our first year MSW students, they're still in the process of forming some of these theoretical concepts. So the process of how we place students. So we refer the student to you. You will interview them, and you decide that you like each other and it's a good fit, which it almost always is. Then you do your background checks and drug screening, and then you confirm that they will be an intern for you for the coming year. And then we introduce you to your faculty field liaison, which I will be doing for BSW students this week. The semester started last Monday, and it ends the last week of November or the 1st of December. Here's some important dates, and again, we'll send you these PowerPoints. Some important dates for you to have. Labor Day is Monday. Veterans Day is being observed on November 12th, although I believe is it the Saturday before?
Is it Saturday or the Monday? I thought it was the Monday, so.
It's being observed on the Monday.
Okay, oh, okay.
And then Thanksgiving, we're only off on Thursday and Friday that week, and you see the last day of the semester is December 1st. Our BSW students have class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so they should be available. Now I know they have like part-time jobs and stuff. They should be available Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and they should average 15 hours a week. It doesn't matter to us how they do 15 hours. They can negotiate that with you. So if they want to do 2 mornings and 1 full day, or 2 full days, that's fine with us. And then master's students are in class on Mondays and Wednesdays. Some other important dates for next semester. And we don't know which days they're going to be in class next semester. So at the BSW level, they do 225 hours each semester, which is 2 full work days. They should stretch that out throughout the semester. We don't allow them to hurry up and get all their hours done and then put their feet up for a month. That's not okay. Because learning happens over time, and we really want them to be able to walk a client through a change process and see how that works out. They can finish a little bit early, but not too early. Students are the ones who track hours for us, and then they have you sign off on their time log at the end of the semester. Some agencies choose to also track hours, which is obviously fine with us. And they should follow your protocol at your agency for calling in for sick or requesting time off. However you do that, that's up to you. Let me say one thing. We cannot require students to work at an agency for field on a university holiday. A student can choose to do that, and they can certainly get credit for that, but we cannot mandate that they do that on a university holiday because this is technically an academic course. Also, the semester, it's weird in academia. The semester ends at the beginning of December and doesn't start again until the beginning of January. So they're off for a whole month. Students are allowed to volunteer their time during the month of December at your agency if they want to, and if that opportunity exists. but we cannot require them to do that, and they cannot earn credit for hours that are in between a semester. They can only earn hours during the semester. So it's 225 in the fall and 225 in the spring.
For MSW, it's, actually that should be, for the first year students, it's 200 if you have a first year student, so they have to complete 400 hours the whole year. The same applies for as the BSW program. You gotta call in if they follow your administrative protocol for calling in. Students are tracking their hours, and I say I'm not the timekeeper police, but I want the students to track their hours, and I give them, you have a timesheet as well, right, that they sign? Yeah, so the MSW students, I'm asking the field instructors to initial the weeks. If you're familiar with other schools, anybody use Sonia or any one of those IPT things where they do initial the weeks? So I'm kind of piggybacking on that. Just initial the weeks, even if you do it every 2 or 3 weeks, is fine. But at the end of the semester, all the initial should be in place, just to make sure and track that the students got their learning activities. And it's basically, I'm asking the students to not only to track their hours, but also to track the type of learning that they're getting. So are you getting enough? After the 4th week, you should be delving into a little bit more of direct practice. So it's to see, at a glance, for you, the student, to see where they're learning, most of their learning is taking place, which should be indirect practice.
There's a bit of confusion as to which time sheet to use. I know the department and most agencies will have a time sheet. And I always ask them to just, to make a rough note of their hours, and then they can transcribe it to, whatever the
Yeah, so if you're
I don't want to add more to it, but I just wanted to, hear some discussions on that.
Right, so if your agency has, I don't know the BSW, but if your agency has a timesheet, I think that the students should follow your protocol. What I ask them to do is to keep that so that they can reflect on not so much their time, but their learning activities, direct versus indirect practice, to make sure that there's a column for supervision, just to keep track of how they're doing and what if they need to have a discussion, or if you need to have a discussion with the student. So it's basically for that reason, and then I ask them to keep it in their portfolio files.
And you want to talk about the second year?
Yeah, second year advanced generalists is basically the same procedure, but they only have to they have to complete 250 hours per semester.
We apologize for the variation in expectations of hours. That's a CSW base.
Yeah, that's a CSW requirement. And I know if you have BSW students and MSW students from the same school, it gets a little complicated. And then when you add another school to it, but we really, really appreciate your time.
So our students are enrolled in a course called Field Seminar 1, and the professor of that course we call a faculty field liaison. That's who's going to be doing the site visits, and they're available to you to help out with the learning contract and whatnot. There are 2 BSW faculty field liaisons. They are Professor Christine Rothberg, who some of you know, and then Professor Lisa Mays. You'll be meeting them very soon. And then I believe Dr. Christy Cummings is the faculty field liaison for the master's program.
And myself.
And Professor Bell. So each student has a faculty field liaison, it's their seminar professor. And this person will reach out to you. In most cases, we try to keep this continuity between semesters when we can. It's not always possible, but we try to do that. If you need anything, this is your go-to person. Of course, you can also come to us, but chances are, because this is the student's seminar professor, they know the student a little bit better than we might potentially. So what do students need to learn? We talked about what CSW is, and the EPOS stands for Education Policy Accreditation Standards. This is the document that basically says, here's what students should learn in a social work program. And the EPOS came out, it changes every 7 years. The latest one is the 2015 EPOS. Both our BSW and MSW programs are following the 2015 EPOS. So, what is the learning contract? This is basically an agreement. It's really more about the documentation of a conversation, but you're going to sit down with your students at the beginning of the semester, and you're going to take a look at the learning contract, which contains all of the core competencies and the component behaviors. And we ask that you have a conversation with students about how, where, and when they're going to be able to work on these particular component behaviors. So we're going to dive into this a little bit deeper in a minute. But the learning contract is that document that outlines where a student and how a student is going to be able to work on and eventually master the particular component behaviors and core competencies. Does that make sense? For me, for the BSW program, it's a Word document. It's got a grid that you fill in, and the student emails it to their faculty field liaison. It's a very straightforward document. We'll go over it in a minute. And we hope that each supervisor will really give some thought to where and how students will be able to work on these particular core competencies. Again, to stay accredited, we have to be able to demonstrate that this is happening. So that's why we need your help with this. We also think it's a pretty good idea to have a conversation with supervisors right up front about what's expected. And that's the other part of the learning contract is this gives you an opportunity to say, you know, here's what you're going to be doing, and students can ask about that, and you can explain that to them, and it should feel collaborative in nature. If you're having a hard time with your learning contract, our faculty field liaisons, again, the seminar professors, are available to assist you with that. So, we have to demonstrate the mastery of these core competencies. And some of us in this room, including me, got their MSW 15 years ago, right? And we'd like to think that social work education doesn't change that much. And for the most part, that's true. We hang on to our values, right? The code of ethics doesn't change that much. But the core competencies do vary a bit from, not a lot, but they do vary from one revision to the next. And so they do have a short shelf life, which means that even if you recently went to graduate school or got your social work degree, there's a chance that the competencies have changed since then. So even last year, in 2017, we were on a 2008 EPOS. So we're all on 2015 now, but some of you may not be familiar with this specific version of core competencies. So we're going to go over these. And I want you to think about which opportunities might exist in your agency for students to work on these. So this is learning contract in the BSW program. It gives you sort of an instruction about how to fill this out. So here we have the competency written out. So for example, competency 1 is demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. Then what we have here, these are called component behaviors. And this is sort of an operationalized version of this. So the competencies are these broad, overarching sort of ideas. Demonstrate ethical and professional behavior. Okay, so what does that really mean? So the component behaviors sort of spell that out a little bit. And so what you would do in the learning contract is you would go into this grid here, and you would talk about where, how, and when students will be able to work on that particular component behavior. Right? Everybody get that? It's really simple, really straightforward. And it really helps you, I think, to think through where these opportunities will exist. And then when we're going to ask you to evaluate your students' performance at the end of each semester, the handy thing about this document is that you can go back and look when you evaluate the student, because our evaluation is going to ask about how is the student doing in the competency and the component behavior. You're going to be able to go back and look and say, oh yeah, here's where we said that was going to happen. And then you can think to yourself, how did the student do in that area of practice based on what we said that they wanted to do? So it's also a tool for you in evaluating students. The second, I just want to go over these very briefly. The second component or competency is engaged diversity and difference in practice. Then we have advanced human rights and social and economic justice. And they added environmental justice. That's one of the new things in social work education. The idea is if we don't have a planet to live on, we're all goners anyway, right? So that's part of social work now. Engage in practice-informed research and research-informed practice, meaning, how does the research shape why we do the things that we do, right? And then engage in policy practice, sort of the macro sort of social work. Engage with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. Assess individuals, groups, organizations, and communities. And intervene with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. And evaluate practice with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. So we also have, let me show you, an example of activities that Professor O created of things that might go into that grid, right? So for the first competency, here's a list of all the things students could do maybe in your agency. So that's really not to give you something to plug into the missing parts or into the grid. It's to kind of help you think creatively about the different things that a student could do within your agency. So she's listed about several under each of the competencies to sort of give you some ideas, to get your creative juices flowing and working, to help determine in advance what students will be doing. Are there any questions about? We try to make this as simple and straightforward as we can, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. Are there any questions?
Are there any, a lot of these materials, will they be given to us?
They will be emailed to you.
Okay, good, thanks.
And the students will have, in case you accidentally delete your email or something, you can always ask more, and the students will have it as well.
Yeah, the students should have it.
So how do we know students are ready to graduate or competent? So we conduct an assessment, and the assessment happens at the end of each semester. We have you evaluate the student, and this year it will be an electronic document that we will send to you. It'll be a hyperlink or a URL that you will click on in the email that will take you right to that document. The wonderful thing about that is we're going paperless this year for the most part with social work education, just to kind of make things easier for everybody. Students will also evaluate themselves and identify how they think that they're doing. And we like to compare those results. Also, UNF has bought into a program called SWEEP, which stands for Social Work Education Assessment Program, which has created an exam, sort of like the licensure exam, but at the generalist level and at the advanced generalist level. And our students will take those exams to kind of allow us to evaluate whether or not we're teaching them what they need to learn. Right? So that's how we do our assessment. We used to have our our own exam that we made up, just a knowledge exam, but because we didn't have anything to compare it to, it would have taken years to really have any sort of validity. So we went with something that's been proven that we can actually compare our results to other institutions around the country.
Quick question.
Yes.
The sweep exam, will supervisors have the ability to take that test to kind of see what you guys are expecting from?
That's great of you to.
They should be able to send you the link, I don't know, we will see, you know. It's just a link that we send the students, they sit in the classroom, computer room, and that's where they're sitting there in the computer room, and they all take the test at the
I'll
same
check into that. I'm
No,
not
but
sure.
we'll
about
see, yeah.
Just to know.
Yeah, just to know, yeah. And it's basically built off of the 9 competencies.
Yes. So just to give you sort of an overview of who's in charge now in the social work program. Our BSW program director is Dr. Paul Clark, who many of you know. And our field education director in the BSW program is me. We've had a change in our MSW program director this summer. Dr. Spalding Givens accepted a position as our MSW program director. She was the other founding faculty member and former BSW program director. She just earned tenure and promotion. She's the first social work faculty member to go through that process and succeed. So we're very happy for her and excited, and she's doing a great job. And then also very lucky to have our MSW field education director, who brings with her a tremendous amount of field experience from Indiana University. Our faculty field liaisons, Conke will be the one for the second year MSW students, and then Dr. Christy Cummings in the back will be for first year MSW students. So these are the seminar professors. We have a lot of roles here and a lot of hats at UNF. And then the faculty field liaisons in the BSW program will be Lisa Mays, Christine Rothberg, and of course I'm a part of that as well. All right, so here, I'll send this to you so you'll have the 9 social work competencies.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about termination, because it's really important. As you know, termination begins at the beginning. So as the students come to whether they're doing micro work, macro work, it's termination with the client system, and so on. So as you get in, the students should be talking about the end, right? As they work towards whatever social change they're working on. So as they begin, got this on line. You start with your assessment, you start with the planning, we know the whole drill, right? All the way to termination. But as we assess it, we're thinking about, and I'm speaking to the choir, but I say to students that it's really, really important. And why it's important, as clinicians, you know better than I would. You want to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going. So you're not in therapy open-ended, right? You come in, you say, I give you 6 weeks, so let's think about this, and so on. So we want the students to have the same idea. So you are the intern for that whole semester, and then you're the intern for the next semester. Please tell your clients, this is what I say, we say to the students, that I'm only here for a certain amount of time and then I leave. So that they're not coming in looking for the student May 1st. But you told me that the student Susie would be here and she's not here. We never talked about when I would end and Susie's not here, I'm so sorry. So it's just good practice. That's why that's fine with it.
So a couple slides here on safety. They're basically, and this comes from there's a whole office of attorneys here on campus. Let me tell you. And they have decided there are 2 things for liability reasons our students cannot do. The first one is unaccompanied home visits, meaning they cannot go to a client's home by themselves. Now, they can do home visits and should do home visits, and I'm a big believer in home visits. You need to see clients in their natural environment and disrupt that power differential of the social worker. We want them to do home visits. They just can't do it by themselves. They can go with a staff member or even another intern, but they can't be alone for a home visit. So we tell them if you are, in some cases, they'll be meeting their supervisor. I imagine a DCF, if they're in their own car, they're probably going to meet somebody at the home or in Duval County Public Schools too. They're not allowed to go into the house and get things started until the employee gets there with them. Second thing they're absolutely not allowed to do is drive a vehicle where they have the steering wheel. Whether it's their car or an agency vehicle, they cannot transport clients. They can ride in a car with clients, but they can't be the driver. Any questions about these two? I think there's another slide. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add some more stuff to the safety issue, and it's really broad. To students not making home visits and sitting in cars, with their private cars, but also in terms of we have students who are working at host agencies or at hospitals, the airborne and all that stuff that we talk to students about. But also, you want to be mindful of conflicts, workplace conflicts, what might happen. Stay out of trouble. I always use all understand what the safety measures are. So I always give this example that one time I was making a site visit at a hospital, and I heard code blue, blah, 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 and the field instructor was just sitting there. We were still in the room, and I asked her, well, what's going on? I noticed all these people were moving up and down, going crazy. And she says, oh yeah, that's for the doctors, code blue. So then I realized, like, ooh, we really need to know what's going on. What are the safety measures that our students need to take? So if you haven't had those conversations with your students, please do. Try to give them a heads up of what the safety measures are at your office. Yes, ma'am.
I think this is very relevant today, but people that are packing,
yes,
that are coming in with weapons,
yes,
and if you're, that you gain situational awareness, especially for the students, that they're aware of their environment, and if their gut's telling them it's not safe, just drive on.
Yes, 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 and that's secretly in the office as well. We had another incident where the student was doing her placement, and not here, I'm sorry, and the client followed the student into the restroom, right? So it's a matter, and how do you keep your doors if you have a client coming in? Do you keep your door ajar? You don't close your doors, that kind of stuff. Beyond,
Well, and even setting up your office.
Yes.
Have your back, let easy access to the door.
Yes.
So if somebody wants to go, you're not in their way.
Right, yeah, just being alert, right? Yeah.
So we do basic teaching about safety, but this is really going to get specific with you for them. Our students don't know what your agency does in terms of safety, so we hope you'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
As far as professional liability insurance goes, our students are covered through UNF. As a social work student, they have professional liability. I don't remember the amounts. If you need that information or you need a copy of that, I know Community Hospice has to have a copy of that. We can get that to you. We also encourage students to purchase their own liability insurance, which if they're a student member of NESW, which is, I think about $50, $58, for an extra $15, they can get like $1 million, $3 million liability insurance as a student, which is a lot cheaper than what we're paying, right? So they're pretty well safe. But if you need that information from us, we can get that to you.
Yeah, and I just like to say that just from the research, that the students who really have a good field instructor at the agency and have the supervision and all that stuff, it really works, and they really enjoy and have a satisfactory field practicum. And they never, as Ross said in the beginning, and you probably can attest to that, you don't forget your field instructor. You might forget the courses, you might forget your instructors, but you do not forget your field instructor, right? Whether they were good or not so good. I mean, I can remember my BSW and my MSW field instructors, and that's like many years ago. So, yeah.
So we want to say thank you for doing this. It is a commitment on your part that we know is extensive, and we realize that, and we appreciate that, and our students really appreciate this. So I think, when I think about being a social worker, one of the really wonderful things about this profession is that most days when you're driving home from work, and you just get to have this sense or this feeling that you were a part of something today that mattered, and it's one of the tremendous rewards of the profession, right? This is a big deal what you're doing for our students, and the impact that you're going to have on them isn't just about them. It's also about, think about all the work that they're going to do throughout their careers. It's kind of like you throw a tiny little pebble in a lake, and all of a sudden the ripples go way out. You're making a huge difference here, and we want you to know that we recognize that, and we're very thankful for your help and your work. And thank you for coming here today. Many of the people in this room were mentors of mine, Jan and Donna and Sharon and Bill. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, and I know that our students are great hands. And thank you all very much. If you have any questions, we're happy to do those, or if you want to talk to us specifically about something in your agency, we can do that as well. Are there any questions?
About your students, if you want to meet with your faculty liaison, we have time as well.
Do you have a list as to who the field instructor is?
Yes.
Will you be sharing that?
I'll share that.
I have just a practical question of what you would suggest when you're working with an intern. This happens probably about 1 out of every dozen interns I've worked with, is that they, on a theoretical level, they might be able, they're growing and developing, their perspective is maturing. They're just not good with people. I know you said you're vetting people in the program that, and so I'm not, in no way is it a reflection of you and I, it's just that sometimes you get interns that they get it on a theoretical level, you're talking to them in supervision, but when they get in front of a client and you can see it, it's just not good, and it's not, there's a skill set that's really difficult to teach. I mean, I haven't been able to teach it with all my employees, so what would you recommend in that situation where you're working with someone?
Do you feel like they're missing genuineness, or they're really nervous, or those kind of things?
Not connected.
Not connecting. Often it's a sense of judgment coming through, although it's not something you put, it's often just something you can't put your finger on, but our clients get it.
Yes.
You know your clients, so.
Yeah. So, what is the skill exactly? Is it, I know you said
Sounds like engagement.
engagement, or maybe empathy, or not empathy, I would say, because if you say that they're judgmental, you can't really put yourself in this client's shoes to judge. So it's interesting that you're saying that. This last class, I noticed I was spending a lot of my humanities class. I mean, you have to engage with micro, meso, macro. Right? I found myself spending a lot of time on assumptions, and how do we break down those assumptions. So maybe it's work in progress, work that we have to continue doing this. I just find that a lot of our people today lack empathy somehow. Maybe we're tired, maybe it's a reflection on society that you're seeing. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's something that we need to be mindful of.
Or do
What do you think?
Or do you think they just can't relate? Because sometimes if you're used to, you grew up a certain way,
Yeah.
and then your client comes from a totally different background, and some people can't relate, and we all can't relate to everything, but like I said, you can have empathy, but sometimes it's just, they're just, I can't believe that, they went through this, I don't know if it's more of a detached, because sometimes people are very detached from, just society in general.
I was going to say, with some of my interns that I've seen, there's like inability to conceptualize where the client is coming from. They apply their own backgrounds and their own experiences to what they expect it should be. And so they have a hard time understanding why a client's behavior is a certain way based on their experience. And so they have a hard time connecting with that, having empathy for that client, because they can't conceptualize, well, I can't understand why a client comes to this opinion or comes to this decision and this type of behavior, because that shouldn't happen in society. But it does, because our experiences are different.
Why would that mom stay in that abusive relationship? I would have left the first time, like stuff like that. So one of the things we teach is everyone has biases, right? We are all, every one of us has ideas about what's right and wrong and what works and what doesn't, and how people should live their lives. And we teach them that, and we actually have them take an assessment of their bias, to take an inventory of their beliefs. And then we tell them that, you can believe whatever you want, but you need to own what that is and be aware of it and notice when those beliefs start to get scratched on by certain clients and certain populations. And we really want you to work in supervision with your supervisor on how to mitigate that stuff. Now we teach yoga breaths and all kinds of other stuff about how to do all that stuff. But when it really comes down to it, I think every social worker is going to work with people who are different from them. And if they're having a hard time empathizing, I would wonder, is that because they suck at empathy? Or is it because they've got some personal bias that's being activated in this client? And so, I guess this is a really long answer to your question, Patrick. I think I would want to know which of those it is. Is this person bad at empathy generally? We try to make sure, but sometimes you never really know until they get in the field, right? They talk a good talk, but then they have a hard time walking the walk. So if that's an issue, that's something we would want to be, we'd like to be a part of that conversation.
If it's possible, a real helpful tool, and I haven't done it a lot, but over the years when I've done this, is videotaping sessions. And they're powerful.
Yes.
People see themselves and examining the impact that their dynamics are having on the client, and read that.
Yeah, well, we do that, I have to say, in the practice class. So we do have the student work on interviewing themselves and taping it. And how did you work on engagement? How to stay, students are so fast to move to the end, right? How do you keep there? So we do have that and have them engage and then we review it. Some other hands, I'd love to hear.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that we have at United Way is we have ongoing regular diversity training, but we also have something called the poverty simulation that we do throughout the community. I know a bunch of them were done over at UCPS recently, and they're very insightful. You've got it coming here?
No, we had it here.
Okay, great. And so I always make certain that our interns have at least one opportunity to participate in that, and then perhaps even go back and help run one. And certain readings, I know it's a little controversial, not everybody loves Ruby Payne, but at least it's a great conversation starter. And so we often have our interns read things or offer to bring things in so that we can have conversations around that idea of people being very different than who you are and the biases that you bring into things.
Another book is The Working Poor.
Yep.
Yeah, Glass Castle.
I was going to go back and say Gina Green.
Oh, Gina Green.
it really gets them thinking about where they came from and where some of these beliefs come, and you can start to question those.
She can drown out the student, is that what you're saying? Yeah, nice. Yeah. Good idea. Somebody up over here had your hands up?
I just have one comment. One thing that I do with my students is I try to, I present a video. And on this video, it has different people from different backgrounds. And you really don't know their background because they're living, they're basically entertainers. And I ask them to try to give me an idea of what that individual is. What is their background? Where did they grow up? What was their life like? And they usually give me one that's contrary to what that individual actually is like. A lot of, just for example, I use rappers sometimes. A lot of rappers have master's degrees. A lot of rappers went to college. A lot of rappers talk about one way, but they live in a two-parent home. They grew up in the suburbs, and this is how they make their money. So a lot of people's perception comes from what they see and what they're exposed to from music, television, but that's not the reality.
Right.
Is it?
Yes, good, good. So we give a lot of good examples in here that I have to be mindful of myself. Any more thing? And this is, I like this because to me, this is what we support each other and you support each other during this time. Yes.
I just think that a lot of people nowadays are desensitized to what's going on in the world. So, you know, hey, he got killed, okay. You know, or, oh, she lost her house, okay. You know, it's like it's empathy, but they're desensitized to other people's issues.
Like just another shooting? Right?
Yeah, you know.
This is how
you know, we see that all the time. We get all the time, you know, they're just desensitized. I mean, really, technically, I mean, just for example, it has nothing to do with, you know, anything major, but there's a train that comes past my house. I'm desensitized to people. When I'm on the phone, who say, "Is that a train?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the train." I have now mentally blocked that train.
You don't hear it anymore.
I don't hear it anymore. You know, so it's just like that. You know, you get used to seeing something so much, or you're so used to it that you just, it's just another day.
Once I found myself just this past week when we were in training, we were talking about safety, but then we found ourselves kind of talking about self-care as well after that, and just seeing even from the student level with the working and school and time, but also still stressing their self-care. Because one of the students had a client and she was going to go on helping her, but she has cats and I'm allergic to them, but I can still go. And so just getting her to understand, like, no, you know, you keep doing the process good, but self-care.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up the self-care piece that some of us did. It's really, really important. So we incorporate it in the classes as well. And sometimes students laugh like, why? So it's even mandated by the Council on Social Work Education to talk about self-care. And there's a lot of literature on self-care and burnout, and if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. If you burn out, you make lots of errors, you take shortcuts. So there's a lot of burnout in child welfare, a lot of literature on it if you are interested. So it's important that we do take care of ourselves, or else we really can't, I don't want to say that we can't empathize, or we get cold, or just so, it becomes very common, so we don't pay attention, we don't notice it as much as we should. So all of these things, there's a lot going on right now, and for our students to be going through these programs and then coming to the agency, it's a lot more we have to be mindful of and attentive to. So thank you so much for bringing up that point. I think it really, sparks some really great discussions and things for me to even think about as well. Any other concerns of your agency that you, we have a moment, if it's something burning and you have questions about what the competencies look like, what they should be, and so on and so forth. Yes, ma'am?
They have to do 2 full days.
It could be two half days and 1 full day.
Yeah.
Or 4 half, whatever works for you and the student is fine with us.
Right.
We tell them, don't expect to be working nights and weekends because you had a job and that's all that fits your schedules. We tell them social workers work during the day, during the week. Now, if you have a special event, on a weekend that you want a student to go to, they can go to that, of course. We just don't want them to expect to be accommodated when you're not at work. So that's whatever works for you.
Yeah.
They are in class almost all day on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Oh, yes,
Wait.
MSW. So MSW is in
Monday.
class Monday and Wednesday. And they start at 3 to 8 something. So they're pretty busy, and many of them have full-time jobs and so on. So I leave it up to you and the student to be as flexible as possible, but there are no shortcuts, there are no cutting corners, you can't finish early, you gotta, do the beginning, the middle, and the end, and so on and so forth, so. Yes, sir.
One question I would have is, based on what you're seeing, what both you and Ross are seeing, are there any specific expectations or fear of field work that, I've seen it not necessarily from UNF students, but I have it from other programs, that there are some fears about going into homes, going into the field, going into specific areas of town at certain times of the day, which we all know as social workers, we don't really get that option because we got to meet the client where they're at. So I'm curious to see, when you're talking to students about field placements, are there specific concerns that they air? What kind of expectations do they have for their field experience?
I haven't had any from the MSW students.
We try to, we're not just teaching them, we're also socializing them. We talk about, social workers do home visits. And this isn't for everybody, and maybe it's not for you. And the expectation we have is you're not allowed to say, I'm not going to this part of town, or what, that's not okay. We meet.
I've had that from students
Yeah.
from other universities.
I hope, I would be really upset if one of our students said something like that, and I would want to know about that.
I specifically, and I'm bringing one example, I specifically had a student that basically said, well, my dad's not comfortable with me doing home visits, and I'm like, well, I'm not comfortable with you being an intern. Like I said, I haven't had it from UNF, but I was curious to see if you guys had seen any trends.
We would address that if that came up.
You address that issue with your students?
Oh, yeah, I address that.
I get very uncomfortable.
It doesn't come up very
Yeah,
often.
we'll interview, we're not having that.
I'm not looking for all of
And they really don't, I haven't had it.
I was just going to say, my intern is the cutest, sweetest thing. And on the first day, as we were getting ready to walk into a school, she said, I'm so excited, it's my first day of field placement. So.
Good. And we also say to the students, you really need to dress appropriately. So we ask that you have those conversations with them as part of the safety as well, As you mentioned, the cutest girl.
She dresses very nice and she's so
too.
punctual.
Yes, good.
Okay, we told them being late is a cardinal sin against humanity. If somebody's late, they got that really.
Yeah, and I mentioned it too, if you're late, it's part of your professionalism. People are looking at you. Is it informal and informal? And I also say that the informal piece is that you got to be careful the way you talk and who you talk about, even if you don't mention names. Like I gave the example of a student talking about a field instructor. Didn't call any names, and there were people around, and they knew exactly who the students were talking about. And they went back to the field instructor and said, what kind of students do you have talking about you? But she took that, moment as a teachable moment to the students and say, I understand, blah, 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 but this, which was really brilliant and kind of her, and didn't dismiss or do anything with the students. But we're saying that it's part of the professionalism that you talk, that you be mindful of what you say, not only about your field instructor, about your clients. Facebook, be careful.
Any other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you so much for your time.
Please take a bagel on your way out.
Yes, take something, take a granola or something. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to shoot your field liaison